it's ready. Well, good afternoon to you all. I'm so excited to join you. My name is Tyler Rohrbal, and I'm Yellowdig's Head of Growth and Partnerships. And we're excited to share a product demo webinar with you all today. And for those who are still joining, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. That's helpful for me in understanding, where you may be coming from and how I can best present the platform today such that it's relevant to you. I'll do a little bit of a deeper introduction into myself, but of course we're going to do a product demo is the goal today, and that's where we'll spend most of our time. But before we go into the platform, I do feel it's important to just cover an overview so that everybody is on the same page, especially for anyone who maybe has not seen or used Yellowdig before. From the introductions, I do see a handful of clients that have joined us, Yellowdig clients, which is great. And for those of you who are maybe newer to Yellowdig, hopefully today gives you a great overview of what we do, how our platform works, and really, more importantly, how it might add value for you, your instructors, and your students. And just some housekeeping, do know that this is recorded, and we will be redistributing a recording of the session. And please use the chat or the Q&A function. Brianna from our marketing team is standing by to help me to address any of those questions in real time. And throughout the conversation, look out for resources that Bree might share in the chat as well, things that may be relevant to whatever we're speaking to at that moment. Well, without further ado, let's get started here. So I joined the team in 2017. So I've been on the Yellowdig team for about 4 years now, and I have the fortunate responsibility of managing many of our partnerships. I work with many of our largest institutions and work very closely with our marketing team and our client success team to ensure that all stakeholders that are using Yellowdig or interacting with us are seeing value. And I know many of you have introduced yourself. We have instructional designers present. We have some LMS administrators, a couple of department leaders, instructors as well. So we'll try to touch on a wide variety of ways that Yellowdig adds value for each of you as we go. So before we talk about what Yellowdig is, let's first just level set on what we're seeing in our market. And everything on this slide has nothing to do with Yellowdig, but more to do with what we're observing as our industry changes right in front of our eyes. And especially as a result of the COVID-19 outbreak, we're seeing even more pressure on universities, from the administrators down to faculty, to find ways to ensure that students have what they need and are going to be successful no matter what may be happening around us. And when thinking about Yellowdig and our philosophy, for those that are not familiar with Yellowdig, Yellowdig is a community building platform. And a lot of the things that we see happening in our space, they really speak to a larger need to build community in higher education. Of course, there are campuses. And of course, there are many platforms, from an LMS to other technologies that may be used outside of the classroom, social media, that think about community, that try to build community. But community building is much more than simply likes and comments and posts. And for many students, it needs to be more than a leafy campus. Simply having a campus, especially as a result of what we've seen over the last 18 months, it does not mean that there is a true community present. And that is the core of what we do at Yellowdig. Not just provide the opportunity for community, but work with you very closely to understand what are the right behavioral incentives that we should be building into our communities. For faculty, what is the right data that you need to have at your hands at any moment during your course to help you to be a better instructor? That is the kind of community building that we focus upon, that we build, and that's what we're going to share with you today. But relevance, of course, is also something we're thinking a lot about today. And relevance can mean many things. What we've learned as a result of the COVID-19 outbreak is that Yellowdig is not just made for fully online courses. It's not just made for hybrid courses or simply just for face-to-face courses. Yellowdig, through asynchronous community building and through providing students with more agency to talk about the things that are important to them, allows you to ensure that your discussions are relevant no matter what may be happening around you. Maybe we start the semester face-to-face, and suddenly by the middle part of the semester, as we experienced last spring, we're forced virtually, or we're forced into a virtual modality. Or maybe we're teaching a particular subject matter, and halfway through our course, something drastic has happened in our world, socially, politically, economically, that impacts the kinds of things that we would hope students can discuss. Well, it's not always easy to keep the course relevant, to ensure that the modality remains relevant and that the conversation remains relevant while things around students change. And that's very important to us. And of course, being outcome driven. Yellowdig prides itself on being a platform that was built for educators by educators. And we spend a tremendous amount of time and energy with our partners to understand their data, to think about the KPIs that matter most to them, whether it's measuring assurance of learning, measuring changes in student engagement, hopefully understanding how and where Yellowdig is driving retention, whether at a course level, at a program level, or at a graduation rate level. We want to make sure that whatever we do, it's focused in outcomes. And hopefully you'll see examples of how this philosophy has proliferated itself throughout our product and our company. So where can Yellowdig build communities? This is often a question asked, and my answer often depends on who's in the audience, because Yellowdig will provide you with an opportunity to build community throughout your entire student life cycle. Given our audience and what we had hoped to accomplish today, I'm going to focus primarily on the curricular context. So thinking about undergraduate and graduate courses, potentially high school courses, regardless of modality, where we may be able to add value in the course context. But for anyone who may be responsible for thinking about student retention throughout the first year or throughout other aspects of the life cycle, who may be responsible for providing students with those opportunities to engage co-curricularly outside of the classroom, or even thinking about ways that faculty can engage amongst themselves. These are things that we think a lot about and that Yellowdig can help you to do, to help to build community in all of these areas. So now that we know who's in the room, hopefully you're able to identify where on this spectrum you may lie. But of course, Yellowdig stands to add value for each of you, perhaps for different reasons. Thinking about our students first, and that's primarily who we focus on when we're thinking about building new product. We want to identify ways to improve the student experience, typically looking at student satisfaction rates, qualitatively or quantitatively, that we can measure together to really understand whether or not Yellowdig is adding value for learners. Are they spending more time in Yellowdig than they would spend in the LMS discussion? Are they coming back to Yellowdig more frequently throughout the week? Are there various behavioral patterns? These are things that we're thinking a lot about. And as a segue into thinking about the instructor, we want to drive a better investment of that instructor's time so that they're not just spent grading, but rather their time is spent analyzing data. A lot of what I'm going to share with you today is data that you can use as a practitioner to make actionable decisions in real time on how you can help your students. And it's important, again, to highlight that we want to do this regardless of modality. So maybe you're new to teaching online and your courses are going back face-to-face soon. Yellowdig will add value regardless of whether you're teaching face-to-face, hybrid, or fully online. For our administrators, of course, we're thinking about how the engagement rates that we're trying to drive and improve in Yellowdig are hopefully impacting course drop, or hopefully impacting course persistence. And these are both KPIs that we spend a lot of time with our administrators to understand, well, where's our baseline today, and how might we improve by even a few percentage points so that Yellowdig can actually turn into a profit center, retaining tuition dollars for the institution. And for our more technical team members, anybody who may be on the IT team or who may spend a lot of time analyzing data, we have various parts of the platform that are really devoted to you and thinking about your needs, whether it's leveraging health dashboards, analyzing data through the use of our API, thinking about how that data may pipe back to different systems. Or simply thinking about security and accessibility and all of those important aspects of working in higher education. Yellowdig stands to check all of the important boxes for IT and security teams such that we can get started with you right away, as is indicated here, an LMS integration in under 30 minutes. So perhaps to summarize some of what I've covered on the last slide, on the right-hand side, you're looking at a summary of those KPIs that we care the most about, that we believe that we can create the biggest impact within. And we have a number of studies that actually highlight Yellowdig's efficacy in this area. And Bree, perhaps this may be a good opportunity to drop a link to our efficacy ebook into the chat, if you wouldn't mind, for anyone who may want to spend some more time after today's demo, simply analyzing Yellowdig data. But when sitting with anyone from an instructor to a dean, we're often asked, well, where does Yellowdig perform best? Certain subject matters, or certain kinds of students, certain demographics. And what we've found is that Yellowdig is truly agnostic and with regards to where we can add value. We are working with over 100 institutions, over 4,000 educators active on our platform today, and over 10,000 courses with over 250,000 learners. Something we're really proud of, we recently crossed the 50 million engagement mark. And those are individual engagements between students. We're actually seeing now that we're scaling to about 10 million a week, which is really exciting for us as a company. So what does it look like to engage in Yellowdig? And I know that the answer to that question may be even clearer in a slide or two once we get into the platform. But for anyone that is using the LMS discussion board, often what we see is on the left-hand side of this slide, what is visualized is what we see behaviorally in an LMS discussion, where we have an instructor who is prompting students, and that's by virtue of what is provided in the LMS through the discussion board. And we're seeing then a post once, comment twice conversation often, where students are coming back each week. And as you can see in this slide, there are some challenges with this paradigm. And it doesn't matter how good the prompts are. It doesn't matter how much time the instructor spends providing students with feedback. This paradigm has some incredibly damaging impacts on student-to-student engagement. And that's really what we're talking about when building a community. It's a community of learners interacting with learners. Well, the go-getter students come in early, and over time they learn that they don't have the ability to complete the assignment or complete the discussion until others have commented in response. So we see, and we see this in our data as well, students learning to procrastinate when you're setting them up in an assignment-based discussion. Thinking about relevance, we talked about relevance on a slide or two previous, the conversations start and they stop regardless of what happens in the real world around us. Perhaps you've covered something in, with regards to the presidential election and it's a history course and you're talking about various policies and so forth, and then something happens in our everyday life that is relevant later in the course. It's very difficult to create that sense of relevance and go back in time in that conversation. I could spend probably the whole 40 minutes or so we have left just talking about reasons that this paradigm is damaging. But I think what's most important is that when thinking about the students that really need that community the most, the students that maybe are procrastinating for reasons, who knows, they're coming in and they may be getting 100%. They may be responding to the instructor's prompt, commenting on their peers' posts, and getting their grade. But by design, no one is actually speaking with them. The discussion ends, we start a new week, and we do this over and over again. And that is the student who often needs that community the most. So what we do at Yellowdig, through the use of gameful learning strategies and a variety of best practices that I'm going to share with you today, is provide the students with not separated conversations, but one community. One single community where they come each week to have an engaging conversation about topics that are relevant to the course, topics that the instructor, the teaching team is configuring. But it is no longer their responsibility to only answer the instructor's question. They now have the ability to come in some weeks and they can ask questions. Just like in a face-to-face course where sometimes the best student conversations start with a student raising their hand and showing a bit of uncertainty, Yellowdig allows us to have that same flexibility that we create in a face-to-face conversation asynchronously. Where yes, sometimes the instructor starts the conversation, especially early on in the conversation. But then instead, if you're thinking about, well, how does my role change in this model if I am an instructor using Yellowdig as opposed to an LMS discussion, rather than being the person that pulls the conversation in every direction and grades, you act as the model citizen, where you are coming in and actually participating in conversations, which allows the students to have more ownership over what we're discussing when. And again, we could spend a lot more time talking about this paradigm. Our client success team has built a plethora of material that speaks to why we recommend a more open discussion. And I would encourage you to maybe head to our blog, or later in the conversation, we'll share additional resources that will help you in better understanding what we're describing on this slide. So finally, you get to see the platform. And I promise that is exactly where we're going in the next minute or two. I have one or two more slides, I believe. Yellowdig will provide you with a rich social functionality that is embedded into your learning experience. So if you are using an LMS that accepts LTI, which I imagine everyone on this phone call or this webinar is, we can integrate in a matter of clicks, super simply. Rather than going to a separate conversation that they must participate in and then wait for faculty grades, and then they do this again, the students will come to one single community through the use of our point system, which I'm going to talk a lot about, and the topics. Students will seek participation credit. And just like we pass them into the platform, we are able to pass that data on participation back into your gradebook, so that the instructor is no longer forced into spending all of that time grading. Instead, with all of this new behavioral data that Yellowdig collects, and what you see on the right-hand side is a live representation of how we've done this in the past with Northwestern University. We then visualize this data so that if you are the instructor and you have 5 minutes at the end of the day to find that one or two students that needs your help the most, we're now providing you with that just-in-time data. Looking for the students at the edges of these conversations, the edges of your community, and thinking about strategies to intervene. so that we see the outcomes that we're looking for. Whoops, and this is the last slide, and I see the question that came up here in Q&A, which I'll address next. This is actually what that data looks like in the platform. So you will have the ability, after creating a Yellowdig community, introducing it to your students, to actually measure the sharing, the listening, and interacting that happens. Again, community building is too often focused in, it's focused in sharing. How much content did the students create? Well, what we find is that it's not the sharing that actually leads to a higher learning outcome. It is the listening and the interacting that will lead to better retention, higher student engagement, better student satisfaction rates. All of these things are actually tied to the listening and interacting behavior, and we're now going to give you the ability to benchmark that. Chuck, I do see your comment about the resolution on my slideware. My apologies. These are screenshots of our platform, which could be potentially why you're seeing a bit of a grainy resolution there. But the good news is we're going to go into the live platform here, and I'm going to show you both of these screens when we do so. But I wanted to just double check on this question here in the chat. Brianna, I don't know if you've addressed it or not. Why is my chat? Brianna, could you maybe call upon the question for me? The Zoom functionality, when I click on chat, it's not taking me to the chat, and I don't know what I'm doing wrong here.
Sure. The only question that I see right now is the one in the Q&A, and it's asking about grade passback.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Just simply how that works?
Yes, they want to know if it is possible to go back weekly so that they can monitor student involvement. Okay,
great question. And I'm going to address that question both by talking a little bit about, oh, here it is. Once I stopped sharing, I now see the question from Helen. Great question, Helen. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're going to better visualize the data in our platform so that you don't have to worry as much about what is happening in the gradebook, because there's more data for you and for your students in Yellowdig. But I can also speak more directly to how it works technically. So just again, can someone confirm that you're now seeing a Canvas LMS dashboard?
Looks good.
Great. For those of you that are not using Canvas, have no fear. Yellowdig is LMS agnostic. I'm only using Canvas as it's sort of a quick home base for a few different use cases. But the typical user experience for any instructor or for any student is to launch into Yellowdig from either their course navigation or a more modular course design may have Yellowdig links embedded in different places. And this is what our platform looks like inside of the LMS's iframe, is what this is called. But we often recommend, and for the purposes of today's demo, I'm going to pull the platform up here separately as a new tab, just so you have a full view of what Yellowdig looks like by itself. So as Yellowdig is observing students earn points in real time, for Helen and anyone that's wondering how the grade passback works, we will pass that information back into the gradebook every hour. So it is all but real time. Now the students will see their points changing in Yellowdig in real time in the platform. So a good best practice is always to educate our students when they have questions about how the Yellowdig point system works or how they've earned their participation. Simply look in Yellowdig, and there are a wide variety of visualizations, including a weekly breakdown that either they can see or the instructor can see. I don't want to get too far into the weeds on the weekly breakdown until I just cover the point system at a higher level for anyone who may be saying, well, what the heck is this point system to begin with? But know that we provide you with a tremendous amount of data in the platform. that allows you to then understand which students are doing what in what week. Just to put a pin in it, you know, from what is visualized in your grade book, Yellowdig is only ever passing a ratio back to the grade book. So in this course, which is a demo course, students are able to earn 52,000 points in Yellowdig by the end of the course. Of course, it doesn't mean that Yellowdig needs to be worth 52,000 points in your grade book. Whatever you equate us to, 5% of your grade, 10% of your grade, 15%, we are always just passing a ratio of that back in so that the student sees how they're pacing in your grade book as well. So hopefully that addresses some of what you're asking, Helen. And for anyone who may be thinking a little bit more about how the point system technically works. But let's just talk a little bit about how the students earn their points. And more importantly, why is this more educational than the traditional discussion paradigm? So as you saw on that screen previous, there's an end goal that you will configure, and you will set what we call a period max, which is simply the total number of points that a student can earn in a given week. You know, unless you're in a self-paced course where you may not have as much concern for that weekly structure, we recommend that you give students a target, but that doesn't stop them from going beyond that target. And we have some good data on what happens as students go beyond that target. But this is what allows us to still measure things in a weekly basis while providing flexibility, especially in a COVID environment where students are so busy personally. Any of your adult learners that may be dealing with families at home or professional responsibilities that keep them out of their discussions, you know, you get a 0 or 2 in your LMS discussion, and maybe you're thinking about, you know, whether or not I have the time to complete this course. Whereas in Yellowdig, that max and what we call the buffer that you will configure allow the students to earn a little bit more than they need in total each week to hit the goal without going too far ahead. So they can work a little bit ahead. Maybe they know that they have some stuff going on at work next week, so they want to work a little ahead. Or maybe they've fallen behind and they want to catch up. Really, really important in making sure the student knows exactly what they can do to stay on pace. So after you've established some of that, we get down to the actual point earning rules. And simply turning Yellowdig's point system on, it already is fine-tuned to align with our best practice. But you, just so you know, have the full ability to customize this. Just like in an LMS, we want to encourage students to create content. This is sort of the baseline participation that they're getting. And you do have the ability to configure a word count. Well, again, we have best practices. You don't want this to be too high, because in Yellowdig, students are going to naturally go beyond that as they have deeper conversations with one another. Why will they have deeper conversations with one another? Well, what they begin to realize is that as they share content, either posts or comments on their peers' content, they have the opportunity to earn more points when the things that they're sharing actually spark a conversation with their peers. This is the most important aspect of the point system, because it shifts the student's audience. Rather than simply thinking about that instructor every week and what that instructor wants, they will be thinking about their peers and what they can do to actually have a conversation with their peers. If Brianna has commented on my post, I know that if I comment back and actually start an engaging conversation with her, I will be rewarded for that. And this point system, through incremental changes in future student behavior, instead of grading past behavior, the point system is designed to improve future behavior. Through each of those incremental improvements, we see a much healthier community as a result. And I'm going to go into more data that helps you to assess that health here in a couple of minutes. But I want to pause and just make sure that we have clear alignment on how this point system works and exactly what students do to earn those points. I don't see any questions, I don't think. So as an instructor, of course, you're configuring this point system. We want to work with you to understand your pedagogical goals and outcomes, the learning outcomes that you're interested in understanding from this experience. And then we're going to work with you to design Yellowdig in mind. But we do have a course that will walk you through all of this. So how to set up the points, how to configure the topics. Those are things I'm going to show you in a moment. And that course is free. So for anyone that may be interested in diving in more deeply, that's something else that we can share. Brianna, if you want to maybe put a link to the course in the chat as well. So as the instructor, you're setting this up with Yellowdig's help. And then what are you doing during the course? Well, the students are sharing. So I'm going to try to address a couple of questions you may have at the same time. What are the students doing and what are the instructors doing when they come into Yellowdig? They're engaging with content that is filtered by recent activity. So the things that are most engaging or most recently engaging to the audience are always going to filter to the top, with the ability to then drill down and find those things that you want as needed. And I'll talk more about these filters here in a minute. So students are not just commenting and then leaving, they're coming back. They're having true back and forth conversations with one another. They're @mentioning. These @mentions are triggering back and forth notifications that are bringing the students back into the conversation. The instructor is commenting. The instructor's job is not to participate in every conversation, but to come in here instead of once a week, maybe 3 times a week, 5-10 minutes each time, simply engaging just like the students are, adding a couple of reactions so that the students get a couple of point bumps for that, commenting, or using these accolades. And these accolades you will see on posts only when an instructor or maybe a TA, if you have a TA and would like to provide them with that access, it is a way of providing additional qualitative feedback on the post without interrupting the conversation. One of the things that we try to coach our faculty on when they come into Yellowdig is that they should not feel the need to read every single post. They should not feel the need to comment on every single post, because the students are getting far more feedback than they ever did before from their peers. They're also getting feedback on the kinds of things that they can do to earn more points as they self-reflect. Oh, why last week did I get so many more comments and reactions than this week? Oh, well, last week I shared an article and I asked a question. I didn't do that this week. How might I change my behavior based on what I'm observing? So the instructor instead is interacting with the top content by adding these accolades, maybe commenting. Because just like in a face-to-face class, if the instructor tries to join every breakout group, what happens? The conversations tend to hush. The students revert their attention from their audience, their peers, back to the instructor. Yellowdig is for the students. We want the students to really shine and their conversations to be what the instructor focuses upon. And as you can see, they're sharing, media in response. It's not just the main posts that may contain articles. You actually have the ability to respond, in like this case with a diagram. This student asked a question. I'm struggling with the differences between brand awareness and recognition. Maybe this is a question they would have normally asked in office hours, or they would have normally emailed the instructor. Well, here in Yellowdig, they have the opportunity to ask the question, and their peers have the opportunity to earn participation credit for helping one another. It is for this reason that many of our most engaging courses this fall semester they were STEM courses that didn't typically rely on the discussion board. So when you're thinking about where does Yellowdig fit, it's not just the courses that are already using a discussion board, but also those courses where faculty may be saying, hey, my students don't have that lab to engage with one another in anymore. You know, where are they working on homework together? Normally they're doing that in the library. They're doing that in study groups. They're doing that in the dorm, et cetera. Well, Yellowdig can be that asynchronous place where students can ask questions when they have them and where students can be rewarded for answering one another's questions. Really, really important thing to think about. How can we save time in office hours? How can we reward students for helping one another? These are things that Yellowdig is also thinking about, not just the posts and the comments. So how do you create content? Whether it's in a post or a comment, you're going to see this screen. And as you can see here, I have the ability to add a variety of multimedia. Just because I just got done talking about STEM, a brand new feature that we're really proud of is this WYSIWYG editor for equation creation. You know, maybe I don't know LaTeX yet, but I know what I'm trying to write. You know, with simple keystrokes, I can actually create equations. There's a basic editor as well, or I can go ahead and actually just use LaTeX if I understand LaTeX and want to do so in a more technical course. So maybe Yellowdig is not replacing a discussion, but instead a place where students are just getting participation credit for helping one another on homework. Fantastic use case as well. How can we make this more engaging though? Of course, we want to be able to poll. You have the ability to poll your students. Students have the ability to poll one another. You have the ability to actually record a video. So maybe I want to take it one step further. And you know, I've found here an article. This is an old article, but maybe I found an article that's relevant to my course. I can go ahead and drop a link to that article here into the body. It will, we all know Doug Letterman, I'm sure, on this call. Doug's a great guy. It will go ahead and embed itself here. You know, maybe I want to build upon something that one of my peers had shared earlier in the conversation. So I'm going to mention Olivia. This article really speaks to X, Y, or Z. And you can see that as I'm typing, the students are getting real-time feedback on how many words that they must use in order to achieve that point earning. And of course, that gets them started. But because they're now talking about their own article, Olivia found this article on her own, and she believed that it was interesting. She's going to use as many words as she would like to use in order to really talk about why it's interesting and relevant. So the students tend to ignore these word counts and really just have conversations. And it's a very similar experience in a comment. But maybe she wants to go even further, and or rather, I'm talking to Olivia now. I'm getting my hypotheticals confused. But maybe I want to then record a video in response to Olivia and others, and I want to share my own thoughts. I can actually just grab access to the webcam and record myself speaking to, you know, different things about the article that I believe will be relevant. Really great way of just further humanizing this discussion experience. Great way for the instructor to provide a face in more ways to the students. Great way to facilitate course introductions. And that's honestly the best way to get the conversation started in Yellowdig is, you know, start them off with an introduction assignment. I want you to introduce yourself, share a little bit about what you hope to get out of this course, and where you like to get pizza on campus. You know, something that's going to help to break the ice, just like you do in that face-to-face class in that first week. And then the students are going to come in and engage. They're going to earn points. They're going to share. From a recent survey of students, we found that there's very little confusion with our point system in getting started, nor with the general experience. So rest assured that students pick this up very quickly. Just keeping an eye on our clock here. I want to spend at least 5-10 more minutes in the platform before facilitating any additional Q&A, but are there any questions that have come up here since my last pause, Brianna, that I should speak to?
It doesn't look like there are.
Okay, great. Well, let's talk a little bit about what the typical user experience is beyond just posting and commenting. You know, maybe as the instructor, you're looking to drill down into a conversation. Well, you can simply sort by any topic by clicking on it. You now see that down here. Really fantastic tool for students as well in studying. Very infrequently do we hear from students that they go back in time to their discussions to review content. Well, in Yellowdig, they do that often. So they have the ability to filter. You know, maybe I want to filter by things that are related to finance that the instructor has given an accolade. You know, maybe I'm looking for a good conversation starter that maybe somebody had posted with finance in mind. The platform's now going to look for things that have those two filters. In this case, nothing. You can build these on top of one another. Let me maybe try a different filter here. So you can drill down to find the things that you're looking for, even by keyword. You know, maybe I just want to search for a keyword on top of these other search criteria. So Yellowdig, regardless of the course's size, could be 500 students. We find that Yellowdig adds a ton of value for the instructor there simply in saving them time. It doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to find content. It doesn't mean that you can't drill down even by date. You know, a lot of faculty are used to coming into a space, looking at a certain amount of time, the engagements during that amount of time, and then coming in again. They're going to have that ability to do so using Yellowdig filters. So we've talked about the typical user experience, how students are accessing the platform, what the students are trying to achieve. They're trying to start conversations with their peers as opposed to just get a discussion grade. We've talked a little bit about that faculty experience. The professor comes in not to grade, but to engage in conversation. And now I want to shift to talk a little bit more about what else the professor is doing with relation to data. I do not want to spend time today talking about how you set the point system up, talking about how you configure topics, because we spend a lot of time with that in our onboarding and in that course that I've referenced and that I think that Brianna has shared a link to. So if you're looking for more of the how do I set it up, we have other onboarding resources that we will share with you. I want to spend more time on the data. Because again, when thinking about outcomes, when thinking about how am I ensuring that this conversation is relevant to my students, did I truly build a community? Or is this just a discussion assignment in a prettier version? Yellowdig has data that will help you to answer those questions and more. So I'm now in the community health dashboard. And here I see a conversation ratio of 3.4. Conversation ratio is something we talk a lot about at Yellowdig. And it is the number of unique comments per unique posts. And we can look at this at a student level or at a macro level across, say, a whole course or a whole network of courses. In a Canvas discussion, or rather a Blackboard discussion, any LMS discussion, this would be two posts, one comment. In Yellowdig, we believe that this is a number that you should drive and that we try to optimize and grow, because it's an indication that there are many conversations happening at once. And we visualize that in a couple of different ways. But just to go back on a question, I think it was Helen that had asked about the notion of weekly grading, or how do we see what's happening on a weekly basis. Great, just weekly activity log here. If you go to the reports section, you know, you can break this down on a weekly basis by downloading the data. You can show the log on how things were earned by individual students. You can actually add and change points as needed for individual students. So we have a lot of different reporting and admin functionality that will help you to do what you're looking to do. But what kinds of data might you use to inform that? I need to find that student first before I do something with them. This health dashboard and the network graph that I'm going to talk about next are what are going to allow you to do that. And of course, there is a lot of data that we're analyzing, which is why you're seeing this little modal telling us that the data is loading. But I'm going to start to speak to what, oh, I don't have to. Here it is. So what you see at the top of the community health dashboard is just a quick checkbox. Are you following all of Yellowdig's best practice? Did you enable points? Do you have a weekly reset day that isn't Sunday? Are you using those accolades I've talked about? Are students receiving points when they receive comments? And others relating to how the point system works. You can always click right in to make changes. So if you ever see a little red X, that means, hey, we should probably change something. But here is that community health dashboard that I was sharing as a screenshot earlier. And right now you're seeing this as a comparison of this course, Business 101, against Yellowdig's global population. But you'd also have the ability to compare this internally as you grow with us. So current clients on the line, maybe you're thinking about ways to use this. We could compare, one course against another, or undergrad versus grad. Or as we grow at your university, maybe we compare the business courses versus the humanities courses and see what might be happening differently. But what is in here that could add value? As I shared a little earlier, listening and interacting are really the behaviors you want. Starts with sharing, and this is a demo course, so this course hasn't been engaged in some time, but you want to look for listening behavior. Are students actually viewing the posts? Are they clicking on the hyperlinks that are shared? What is their conversation ratio? These behavioral data points are a far clearer indication of whether or not that student is going to receive an A, whether or not that student is going to drop the course. So we want to give you good indication of what's happening here at various levels. And these are different data points that then compile these composite scores that you see above. So these are, you're in the 59th percentile of interaction across all of Yellowdig. And we can talk a little bit more in maybe future conversations if you're interested about, how you would change your behavior as an instructor based on what you see in this dashboard. But when I speak with faculty, too often we have to wait until our course evaluations. We hear from administrators how important it is to drive course retention, to make sure that our students are taking the next course. But there's very little actionable data that the professor has to do something about that in real time. That is what this does. It gives you that data. And it's not just the behavioral aspects, but also how are we using those topics? This is what helps us to find gaps in the conversation. If you're a professor who may need to share something and you're wondering what you should share, well, here you can see the topics that are getting less engagement than others, and maybe you want to do something about that. Or on a more granular level, which of the students are using topics the most? Maybe here, like Olivia, you have a potential expert in your audience that you can tap. Or a student that is sharing a lot and ignoring certain things, well, maybe that's an indication that they need some support on that particular topic. I did see the question come in. I'm going to talk about the network graph, and then that's probably all I'm going to talk through scripted in the demo. We can answer questions then in the platform. But here is that community health graph. So this is a live representation of the behaviors that we see in the platform, and you can turn off and turn on the profile photos, which we can pull from the LMS. And what we start to see are indications of students that are behaving in different ways, and allow the instructor to think about what they may want to do to intervene. So often what we see, and in this example here, you have Bob who is acting as a TA. Bob had identified 2 students that were not engaging and tried to reach out to them. Hopefully we will see then change in their behaviors as a result of that. Or we'll just simply show you all the students that haven't gotten started yet. Maybe you want to email them, or bump them in the LMS to try to get them started. But the goal here is that we start to actually understand the number of incoming connections students are creating versus outgoing. Are they at the nucleus of this conversation, or are they living at the periphery? And the data that creates the graph you have access to here, and you can filter by, which will allow you to understand students that are talking to a lot of people versus are being talked to, or garnering that engagement. And just when is the last time that they connected? Especially in a larger course, you have 200 students, who is at the top. The students that are performing the best, and the students that haven't even logged in once, but you often don't have enough data on the in-between. A story that I get really excited about that I'll share, and that's probably where I'll stop and transition to questions. We had an instructor who was teaching a senior seminar course at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and she saw students in her Zoom sessions frequently. But then she noticed that while a particular student was in the Zoom session, they were at the outer edge of this Yellowdig network graph. So she decided to reach out to that student. The student said, yes, I do need some support. And this is the first time in our remote learning that anybody had actually reached out to me, because I do attend class. That student was maybe a little bit shy, wasn't comfortable raising their hand in the Zoom. So this is the data that's going to allow you to identify the students that truly need you the most, while you're able to do all the other things that you do in your lectures. You don't get a lot of data from that. So I will leave the platform up while addressing any questions. Bree, did anything come in that we may want to address in particular?
Yes, I believe we only have one question right now, and it's from Michael Johnson. And his question is, in online synchronous courses and possibly in live classes, I use external documents for students to collaborate and to record their thoughts while in breakout rooms or group sessions. Do you see Yellowdig as a place for those kind of interactions to happen? I can see this as a possible way for students to show in-class participation, even though Yellowdig is primarily an asynchronous tool. Any thoughts?
I love this. I love this use case for a couple of reasons. Especially in a hybrid course where we have some synchronous time and then there's a lot of time the students need to be spending on their own, it can be difficult to blend those two worlds. We have a lecture and then everything else happens outside of the lecture, or we spend some class time on certain topics and then we just expect the students talk through everything else. Rather than doing it in a collaborative document, which doesn't give you a lot of data on which students are the most active, I would absolutely see Yellowdig as a place where you could do some of that. And you would use these topics and encourage the students to talk about those things independently. And then during those breakout sessions, have them pull up the Yellowdig community. Or in your larger sessions as a group, we see this often. Professors will spend the first 5-10 minutes of the class just picking a couple of things that they observed in the community that they were really excited about, which helps the students who are not getting on stage to understand, well, this is what my instructor is looking for, or this is how my peers, this is how they're using this platform and how they might see value. So I would love to take that conversation about that use case offline if there's any interest, and we could talk more about ways that we could support you. So I think the reason that I can't see the chat is because I'm in full screen. There we go. So Michael, thank you so much for that question. Are there any other questions as we part ways before I share maybe some things that you'll want to do next, if you're interested in learning more about us? Okay, I'm just going to pull my deck back up for a moment so that we can talk about what is coming next. Oh, where did I had it? It was just up. There we go. So if you are thinking about potentially piloting Yellowdig, maybe today piqued your interest, but you have a few more questions about how you would get started, or really what a pilot at Yellowdig means, please, using the QR code on the left, scan that and you'll get more information about a short 30-minute session that we have coming up, talking about our pilot experience for faculty, as well as our pilot dashboard, which is a brand new dashboard that we've launched. And in thinking about that, if you would rather do that and hear from others that have gone through this pathway and learn about how Yellowdig has added value for them post-pilot, we will be doing a session with DePaul University with 2 of their faculty members, talking to them about their pilot journey, another session that you may have a lot of interest in. And I think that that's it. So thank you all. Hopefully you found today to be a useful